Police officers have always gotten a bad rap for their authority over us, which is very often abused. However, the police are the first ones to get called into action whenever trouble arises, and they'll no doubt see some disturbing stuff. Here are 4 haunting stories of former police officers. Number 4. I was a cop for 30 years. I retired at the age of 50, so of course I had some weird calls. But I'll never forget the night that me and my partner Steve were called to respond to a domestic abuse report. The call was made by a neighbor. These calls were never really a big deal. It usually gave us something to do during the night. Not that I enjoyed dealing with couples fighting and all that stuff. So we arrived at the house. I still vividly remember the address, and I remember the door was left wide open. The second we stepped inside, a strong scent of marijuana filled our lungs. It was everywhere. Not just marijuana though. There was the strong smell of chemicals, which we assumed was either meth or cocaine. We made our presence known by asking for the couple to come out into sight. A thump from the upstairs gave away their position. Steve had his hand on his holster, ready to pull his gun. But me, I wasn't nervous yet. Steve told me to move quietly up the stairs. We normally listen to each other, so I humored his paranoia. There were 3 doors, 2 open and 1 closed. The closed door led in the direction where the thud in the ceiling was. I banged on the door before swinging it open myself. The smell was the first thing we noticed. Then the body. The body was very obviously rotted. We knew even in the dark. We pulled our guns. Steve turned on the light. I told him to scan that room while I scanned the rest of the house. I was shaking all over now. I hated my job at that moment. I wanted to run back to the car and leave, for I was sure I could die at any moment. I found my hand to be stuck on the doorknob until I finally had the balls to turn it and push the door open with force. I turned the light on, but there was nobody inside. It was a disturbingly tiny room, no windows and no furniture, except for a dirty old cot. Steve suddenly screamed, and I rushed across the hall to see what was going on. It was some shirtless guy laying flat above one of the dressers in the room. We had him at gunpoint, yelling at him to come down, when something grabbed my ankle and tried to pull me to the floor. There was a hand coming from under the bed. I stomped on the arm with my other foot and pulled out a frail, trashy-looking woman who was obviously baked. I cuffed her and Steve cuffed the man. We were on our way outside with the 2 crazies screaming at us, but we had one final surprise coming. Some psycho from upstairs started screaming, charging at us down the stairs with a knife raised in the air. Steve reacted just fast enough to save my ass by 2 seconds, shooting the guy dead. This was a crack house. Somehow none of the neighbors could smell anything suspicious. The dead woman on the bed was killed by the man of the 2 we caught, who admitted to killing her due to lack of payment. The man was sentenced to life without parole. The woman was sentenced to 30 years. Steve says he never felt bad about what he did. He says he just rid the world of one more piece of trash. Number 3. Myself and a buddy and my squad responded to an alarm. The incident location was an old office-type building that had been converted to a doctor's office. There was a pharmacy attached to it as well. Our dispatch received a motion signal from an upstairs office. The key holder arrives on the scene and we go in to secure the building. The stairs were locked behind a door that, of course, the key holder didn't have a key to, so we took the elevator up to the 2nd floor. The elevator opens to a pitch-black hallway, except for one overhead light at the end of the hall. We start checking the doors, and so far all are secured. We get to the last office, and sure enough, the door is unlocked. We make entry and observe it to be an unused office. The door opened to a sizable waiting room and reception area. There were about 10 or 12 exam rooms, all cleared with no hiccups. We exit the office, and immediately, something seems off. That's when I realized the overhead light at our end of the hallway that was on before had been turned off. It was replaced by another light over at the elevators. I look at my squad mate and he's completely white. I ask him what's wrong, and he says, "Weren't all those doors we just checked closed and locked?" I tell him, "Yeah, so?" My buddy says, "Well, now they're all standing open." Sure enough, all the offices down the hallway we had just checked were now standing open. The pucker factor sinks in at this point, so we start clearing and securing offices. We finish the last office, and on our way out, just before we turn the corner to get into the waiting area, the main door just slams shut. Then our radios start going nuts with some kind of static feedback. Now I just want to get the hell out of there. We get back in the elevator and head down to the first floor in hopes to make contact with the key holder again. However, the key holder is nowhere to be found. I contact dispatch and request a callback number for the key holder so I can advise him of what we found. Dispatch states that the key holder was still en route to us and was advising an ETA of 5 minutes. I advised dispatch that we had already been out with a key holder. Dispatch requests I give them a call. I called dispatch, and she tells me that there is no way we were out with the key holder. She states that the alarm company had only just made contact with one. Eventually, the real key holder arrives on the scene, and I ask her about the man that had let us in the building. She asked me to describe him, so I did. She states that sounds like one of the doctors that used to lease the office on the second floor at the end of the hall. She then states that he had committed suicide at his summer home several days ago. Number 2. I was responding to a call in the village. A resident was reporting noises coming from one of the abandoned buildings from across the street, most likely trespassing. I arrived and began my search in the building. It used to be a 2-story convenience store. Now it was completely stripped empty, except for the parts attached to the floor, like the counter and shelves. The lights didn't work in there either. I checked every small aisle for anyone to possibly be hiding in, and then I did the same thing upstairs. It was completely empty. On my way back into my car, I looked back at the building and saw somebody at the window on the second floor. It was a woman with long grey hair down past her shoulders. She was no doubt looking down at me with a wide smile on her face. I hurried back inside, making it upstairs in no more than 10 seconds. But the window was clear. There was nobody in sight. I checked all 3 aisles at least 10 times. I checked behind the counter. I checked the bathroom. It was clear. I was a little nervous, so I left again, thinking my mind was fooling me. I looked back at the window, and there she was again. The same mockingly disturbing smile on her face. I went back up there again, this time running around all 3 aisles trying to find this woman. I was about to give it up once more and leave for good, when I noticed something in my peripheral vision. It was on the ceiling. A dark shade of black latched onto the ceiling. I shined my light up there, and there she was. That crazed woman looked at me, still with a horrifying smile on her face, as she held onto 2 hook-like objects in the ceiling with her hands, while her feet were pushed up against the tile to gain support. She laughed like a freak all the way down to the station. I don't know if she had some kind of mental disability or not. It seemed like she was just toying with me, but not at all in the good way. She stared me down through the mirror the whole ride. Number 1. In all my years of being a police officer in Floyd County, Georgia, I had only experienced 2 horrifying situations. I'll share with you the worst of the 2. It was a slow night, and I was patrolling the dirt roads in my cruiser. At this particular spot, there were tiny woods on both sides of the road. And then it all started. I spotted somebody jumping into the woods on the left. I only saw half of them though. They were gone so quickly. I pulled up closer and shined the spotlight into the woods. I didn't see them. Unfortunately, it was kind of my job to check on things like this, so I hesitantly stepped off from the car and began searching. In a moment like this, I was so ready to pull my gun, as I was actually terrified. And then, the cliched snap of a branch from behind a tree almost made me want to run back to the car, but I instead did my job and called for them to come out. Someone wearing a mask stepped out from the tree. I told them to raise their arms, take off their mask, and come to me slowly. They raised their hands, but they didn't remove the mask. I tried to demonstrate my authority by yelling this time, ordering them to take it off. They looked as if they were about to take it off, when suddenly he or she looked to their left, and then back at me. I heard footsteps coming from my right. I drew my gun. I yelled as loud as I could for everybody to come out with their hands up. You may be thinking, why? Well, if you were in this position, in this setting, you would have been shitting yourself just like I was. Another person wearing a mask walked over. This one holding an axe. I had my gun locked on him. But suddenly, footsteps started coming from all directions. I looked around, and I was surrounded. There were at least 10 strangers wearing masks, surrounding me almost in a circle, with only an opening behind me. Half of them were armed with axes and the like. I stood there, gun raised, but not even aimed at anything at this point. I felt like I was going to throw up. One of them, I'm not sure which, finally broke the silence, telling me in a muffled, deep voice, "Go away." My heart dropped as he said this, in a way that I knew I was going to live. I turned and ran for the car, driving down the road half a mile, all while calling for backup. As you would guess, the whole group was gone from the woods when a search squad arrived. I have a theory on this, however. I believe that what I witnessed was some kind of fucked up secret society that was planning on trapping an innocent passerby, and I think that whoever jumped into the woods as I was passing recognized my car as a police car and tried to hide. Had I not been a police officer, I believe they would have stopped me, led me to the woods, and done whatever this group does for its sick kicks.